NCIC Vice Chair Millie Lwanga, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We've just seen you on TV and you're talking about this coded language, but when did the NCIC start noticing this? Because campaigns have been going on for a while.
What happened is that a while back, when we started highlighting the issue of hate speech to the nation, we noticed that we got a lot of support, particularly from members of the Fourth Estate, in trying to highlight the fact that hate speech was an offense and that there was an institution that is now dealing with hate speech.
Yeah.
And the hate that was being perpetrated, particularly during the 2010 referendum on the Constitution, changed or metamorphosed a lot as time progressed, so that people began to use more of coded languages and stereotypes. And you'd find, in fact, we've had complaints from some of our monitors right now that most of the time people resort to vernacular when they actually want to send a deep message.
Yeah.
Because within those vernacular, there are certain coded languages, there are certain stereotypes that they're sure will only be understood by the specific target audience.
Okay, but of course the question here is, how do you control it? How do you control somebody from saying to their members, to the members of his or her community, A, B, C, D about another community?
There are certain, we as a country have said that we need to develop values. We have emphasized the need of values, national values in the Constitution. And other countries, for example, in America, they've banned certain words, just as an example. And they've banned use of certain terminologies, including stating certain words in a neighboring country, Rwanda. So we are saying that we need to develop a value, a culture. We need to agree as a society that it is unacceptable to use certain terminologies when you're referring to an ethnic community.
Do we have time to do that? Because we're drawing really close to the election, and I'm sure as the campaigns heat up, so will that sort of language.
The language is heating up, but the beauty of the study is that it will begin to offer a strong focus for purposes of prosecution. Because when you go to court, now that there's been some study that could offer some guidance to the court as to what certain communities think about certain things as we progress with trying to develop a standard way within which communities will deal with certain words. But for now, with this study, even though it is still preliminary because it should be subject to a lot of validation and a lot of participation, we covered 39 counties. We need to go back and send the counties to them. We need to popularize it a little bit more, and we need to develop a national conversation before we can all agree as a nation that certain terms are simply unacceptable. It is for this reason that we are saying now we need to have this discourse, but at least we have this initial document and initial scientific study that has been done that would be able to support some of the prosecutions that we may have at any time now that the courts would be able to rely on. Let me give you a quick example. In 2010, during the constitutional referendum, people kept talking about Shetani Ashindwe. And there would be people saying that they understood Shetani Ashindwe to mean something.
Right.
But the same statement, the same words were being quoted by preachers in halls, in churches, were being stated by teachers to their students as they're encouraging them to engage in academic endeavors and not other things. So how do you differentiate to the court when this circumstance or when these words are used, when it amounts to hate speech? So this scientific study will be able to give the courts some direction and some support, and support investigative data or investigative material that would be presented that is stating that certain words have particularly incited a community ethnically against another community.
I know it's just the initial report, and you've just mentioned it's just the first of what will be many documents, but you know, they'll keep evolving, because the whole purpose of a coded message is so that not everyone can understand it. So you place a ban on certain words and then others evolve. How do you then control that manifestation?
One of the things that we appreciate as a commission is that the issues we are dealing with are ingrained, and it's about change of society. And this cannot be done by legislation, it cannot be done by banning, it cannot be done by hanging a stick over people's heads. So for us, the programs around awareness and education for people to be able to inculcate these issues or internalize them becomes key. That is why, for example, we have engaged with the education sector, we have engaged with the curriculum developers to try and develop language and use language even within the curriculums that they are formulating that will change certain culture. So we are also talking about, that's why when you look at the report, it doesn't just focus on negative stereotypes. It says there are also positive stereotypes. We can still use stereotypes and coded
Isn't
language
that
positively.
oxymoronic? How can you have a stereotype that's positive?
For example, stereotypes that depict a certain community as being industrious. Stereotypes that depict a community as being loyal. Stereotypes that depict a community as being vigilant.
But don't you think it will create a conflict? Because the minute you say, okay, fine, we're allowing you to say that X community is like this, but only if it's positive, wouldn't it automatically breed negative sentiments?
I'm very hesitant to use the word allowing, because people will use stereotypes. It is a form of communication. It is a way of defining the communities around us. We are encouraging people to use positive stereotypes because it excites people to want to learn what is peculiar about this community that makes them largely loyal, what is peculiar about them that makes them largely industrious. And if we are to achieve our national agenda of coming together as a nation and building finally after 50 years a nation known as Kenya, and not many nations within one state known as Kenya, then we must actively go out to look for things that will promote that kind of engagement. So we are saying you cannot ban people from talking in a certain way.
Yeah.
You cannot stop them from using certain things like stereotypes. It exists everywhere in the world, but we are encouraging people to focus on those that promote unity and excite positive relationships between the different groups that exist in the nation.
All right, thank you very much for coming to join us in our studio this afternoon. We've been speaking to Millie Lwanga, who is the Vice Chair of the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, which, if you had missed